I had this 36 by 24 canvas left over from a workshop demonstration that I did, and that's too large a canvas for me to just throw away. So I repurposed it for this painting of the Palazzo Ducale in Lucca, and I'll turn it upside down so that I won't be distracted by the underlying image. But I just carefully put down a black and white tonal posterization image to work from, and in this video you'll just see me laying down the first color washes over this black and white. I say washes, it's almost a form of scumbling, because some of the colors I mix will have some white in them and will be somewhat opaque, but not so opaque that I can't see the underlying value map. I'm going for approximations of the local color and value without being too precise about it. One of my objectives is to just get the canvas covered with some kind of wet paint, and is almost just a rehearsal for paint I'll be putting down later. I just want to give myself an idea of which direction I'm going in, and how the local colors on top of the value study are going to make things look. This is really kind of a fun stage for me. If I think I see a color, and I'm looking at a reference photograph, if I think I see a color, I'll put it in to see what it looks like. I can always change my mind later. The great thing about this approach is that I'm not giving up any of my drawing, which I put in rather carefully. I'm just experimenting, and some of this will show through in the end. Some of it will get completely covered up, but it's all part of the process of figuring out what would look good. So I'm just mixing up little batches of color, local color, that approximate the value for a given region, approximate the hue for a given region, and just rubbing them on top of my black and white underpainting and seeing what results. This video is running about, it is running at 400% normal speed. The total time this will take will be less than an hour to get everything covered in wet paint. And I can either continue working on it, working back into the wet paint, wet into wet, or I can let it dry and attack it again on another day. I'm not putting in any dark darks or light lights. That'll be reserved for another day. At this point, I'm just trying to put in some middle values. Those are the most important things and the hardest things to get right. It's relatively easy to locate where the brightest brights and darkest darks are towards the end. Architecture is fun to paint. It makes good practice for doing almost anything, because not many people feel emotionally attached to architecture, and you find yourself experimenting a lot more with color variations. That whole shadow area under the umbrellas is very dark in my reference photograph, and I'm determined not to attempt to put in detail there that one wouldn't ordinarily notice or that is hard to see. I think it's going to work just fine as a shadow area with a few intriguing little shapes of light in it. All the masonry in these old towns is kind of a patchwork, or at least a lot of it is, because it shows the decades or centuries of repairs and patches and the adding of utility lines and getting patched up again and being neglected and then getting fixed up again. And so any kind of variation you want to put into these plastered stone walls is kind of fair game because it's all credible to the reality. The other thing I'm mindful on during this step is knowing that if I have a color in one area, it makes sense that it bleeds over into adjacent shapes. So for that reason, I'm not very careful at all about staying within the lines. I'm just brushing across areas, knowing that my black and white underpainting will keep a little suggestion of an edge there, assuming that the paint isn't very opaque. In the place where the canvas underneath was white or nearly white, either from white paint or from just bare white canvas, I can put on this first coat almost as a transparent glaze, and you see that in the yellow stucco in the upper right. That's really just the white surface of the canvas or my underpainting showing through a thin glaze of transparent yellow, which in this case is going to be mostly gold ochre. I'm trying all kinds of things in the shadows of the stone and the stucco. There aren't really any rules. Anything that looks like it might work, I'll try. Could be purples or pinks or grays or almost anything. As long as the value is correct, I know I can get away with quite a lot. This dark shape on the right is kind of a challenge. I know that in reality it's some trees that are in shadow, but I'm going to have to decide how much I want to emphasize that contrast between that area which is actually dark and the edge of the building. I don't want to create too much of an edge there, and certainly not a hard one, because that's not really where I want the viewer's eyes to be drawn. Mostly I think as humans we tend to use light shapes to identify the thing we're looking at, and we're not really peering into the shadows looking for detail, and therefore in a painting the shadowy areas can be pretty vague and amorphous. You can get away with putting almost nothing in them in terms of detail. Now that I've got down some of those kind of whitish grays on those columns, I can come back and put in some lighter grays too, and some darker grays to start the kind of the basic modeling of those columns. Things like that are turning because they're circular or round. It takes a while to, and subsequent layers to sort of modulate the turning of the form. So there's no rush on that. These umbrellas, like anything else, will have planes, the sides of them, the tops of them. The top is made out of several panels, and each panel is facing a slightly different way, so we'll have a slightly different tone. But for now, I'm just sort of blocking in a suggestion to myself. It's almost a form of note-taking for later on. And as I said before, it's kind of a rehearsal. I see what works at this phase and what doesn't, and I'm prepared to make changes along the way. So the painting will end up looking like this after several sessions of going over it and repainting it and leaving behind some detail and de-emphasizing and re-emphasizing important areas until I reach some kind of equilibrium where I'm satisfied. Well, I hope that little video was of some use to you. If it was, maybe you'll consider subscribing to the channel. See you next time.